Redline Narratives Podcast with Engineer Marlon Solomon, Roslindale Square, Parking Justice. The Redline Narratives Podcast is your go-to for understanding how Boston's infrastructure plans impact all of us. We discuss everything from zoning to community planning, to complicated engineering terms, ties to historical redlining and urban renewal, and even the cultural implications of development. It's all about making sense of complex topics and ensuring that you have an informed voice in these changes. We'll be having special guests, city officials, experts, you name it, in order to help us answer the questions so we can make positive changes in our community. So let's lock in and hit these streets. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, to the Redline Narratives Podcast. I'm your host, Engineer Marlon Solomon, and today we're going to be talking about Roslindale Square parking justice, because parking is access, so it's very important. The idea is to look at critically at some of the parking and another access issues with Roslindale Square, and then think, how does this work in my community? We have a lot to cover, so let's dive right in. All right. So first of all, this is really all in response to the Squares and Streets initiative done by the city of Boston, which, if you don't know, is a rezoning effort. So they are going to change what can be done infrastructurally in your communities, right? In particular, right now, it is Roslindale, Hyde Park, Dorchester, Mattapan, Codman Square, Fields Corner. I believe that's what that's the first thing that's those are the first places that are being looked at. But basically, they're looking at all transit rich neighborhoods and providing about 6 options to help increase mostly the heights, so they can go up to 5 floors, 7 floors in your area. So you have to think, how does that affect your community? This is the little square plan that they have here. And this plan right here, this shows the kind of the area that they're going to rezone, but the influence of this area, which, goes way farther, right? Because if you develop here, what happens to the communities outside? And in this case, actually, these areas are areas of culture. So these things, of course, are very important. They change the demographics. They do a lot of other things that culturally to adjust the area. And of course, these things would increase property values. Increase property values means some people will not be able to afford living there, which will cause displacement. All right. City of Boston has done a lot to try and bring it out to people, but I've been very critical of them in these regards because some of the things they're doing are very siloed. Some of the things that they're doing are not culturally competent. So the communication to the people who are actually going to be displaced is not where it needs to be. All right, so let's dive right in. We're going to be looking at parking dynamics, right? We're going to be looking at metering practices. We're going to be looking at the effect of bus transportation, and we're going to be looking at the effect of bike lanes. All of these things affect access to an area. It doesn't matter what you have in an area if you can't get to it, right? How many of us have tried to go downtown to do something and said, you know what, I'm not going to do it because no parking, right? That means no access. If this is done to some communities, their businesses will suffer. Their businesses will eventually um, be out. They'll be out of business. Like I always say, access is usually the difference between being in business or out of business. And to be out of business, it doesn't take stopping all customers, but reducing it 10, 15% can do a lot to it. Businesses, bottom line, and eventually they won't be there. So first of all, we're going to look at some resources that were provided to us by the Roslindale Coalition. Shout out to them. They've been doing a lot of great work to try and get this information and what's going on with the Squares and Streets rezoning to our community. And just want to send a shout out to them. They provided me this information. So First of all, there's a couple of reports I got to talk to you about. Boston Transportation Department put out a report called the Roslindale Business Survey, November 23rd, 2022, where approximately 90% of all the small business owners reported that their customers traveled primarily by car. Once again, if you're traveling by car, you need a place to park. No parking means no access. Over 60% indicate that limited parking availability adversely affects their businesses. Now, remember, this is from the Boston Transportation Department. This is not from the coalition or myself. This is their information. Also, another study conducted October 2021 called from the Boston Transportation Department again, called Roslindale Parking Study. Study reveals a significant shortage of parking, especially during peak hours and crucial days of the week, underscoring the challenge of meeting customer needs while supporting local commerce. Once again, this is their information, not ours. All right. So, given that information, we're going to look critically a little bit at some of the parking dynamics that exist. This is an area called Poplar Street. It's right in this area right here. Um, right? This is where the A is. This is where the A is. And you can see from the streets, of course, like all Boston streets, quite narrow. However, by the time you take out the bus lane and you take out this, it's not really a parking, it's not really like a bike lane or anything. It's really just some extra space because down here there is a lane that turns off into Washington, this lane that turns here. So that's what this accommodates before you get there, right? Now, I got this picture from the City of Boston Roslindale Draft Square Plan from December 2024. So just recently, which shows their proposed plan to be able to make closures in this area. And we'll get into that a little bit, but I thought that would be important for you to see what the city's plan is for the area. All right. So here we go. So, like I said, one of the unique things about Poplar Street is that all the businesses are owned by Latinx, Black, or Asian immigrant backgrounds, a unique characteristic within Rosendale. So there's nothing really like this in Rosendale, as you can imagine if you know the area. That all the businesses on this area, I know the shaking seafood. Oh my God, they have like these like crabs and get in a bag and this garlic butter sauce to die for. Go check them out, right? So the duration. Now, one of the things about it is a little stringent, right? This is the only location in the Roslindale Square core that shows that they have a maximum of 5 minutes. So there's only 5 minute parking. So basically, you can just pick stuff up, drop stuff off real quick, but you got to keep it moving. Now, this does not happen in all the other areas, and we're going to go into those areas a little bit. But it's a little unique because I don't really see exactly why this particular street needs to have these kind of limitations when all the streets in the area are small and have the same kind of amenities, whether it's bike lanes or buses passing through them and parking lanes. So I don't see why the restrictions are so much on this, especially as this is not necessarily the major thoroughfare. Basically, people go around here and they go up through this other area here, and that is how. And then they come through Washington, they divide down Poplar and go down South Street. So there's a little bit of division. So we'll get into that, like I said, in a little bit. Now, examining one of the we've talked about the owner demographics, and we're trying to and we've talked about this severe 5 minute parking, but there's actually more lenient on other streets, especially Corinth and Belgrade. Right? I mentioned that, and this is a picture of Corinth and Belgrade. So as you can see, there are the same kind of space that existed on the like down here, just kind of cordoned off right here. But there's adequate room for parking, even though there's also a bus lane here, a bus station here, and I mean a bus stop. Oh my gosh! And now you can see here in front of this business, there is this is 15-minute parking as opposed to the 5 minute, which exists here, and there's actually no real demarcation to show that on that around the Poplar Street, right? So, and you can see they're all narrow, these streets. This is the major street. Like I said, this is kind of a side street. And one thing I like to say is that there's always reasons why people can justify anything, right? But in the end of the day, this is more about patterns and looking at things cumulatively. And why is this pattern always existing in certain situations that has to do with minority owned businesses or anything for that matter, whether it's healthcare or policing, or we already know the inequities that go on in regards to race in our communities. And why is this always the case? All right. So Poplar Street, as I told you, this is a flyer from back in the summer where they were trying to um, talk to some community members in and around the different closures of Adams Park. Um, One of the things that I do want to say about how the communication is going on is that a lot of times communication is in ways that people cannot really access. So if you're technologically challenged, right, can't use a lot of technology, or you don't have a lot of time, or the surveys, or there was once this um, software that they gave us to help map the what should go where, what building should go where. And me as an engineer, I'm like, oh my god, like I don't want to learn this. This is too much, right? Let alone somebody who is not an engineer. Not to mention, like I said, I've been in meetings where they use big engineering terms. They talk in their silos. They don't try to simplify the information. So instead, for saying S1, S2, S3, which are the designations, like what they call the different building heights. Why don't you just say the building height so people understand? Instead of saying S4, S5, say 5 floors, 7 floors, right? So that people will get it, right? These little may seem like a little, but when you're doing communication and engineering, you have to do that because you have to realize people need buy-in, people need to make informed decisions, and they can't if you're talking in code. Get it? So anyway, so these strict parking limits, okay, I said always put in equity concerns. And once another thing I want to point out is the area of influence. I've mentioned this many, many times when it comes to our work here at the Afro American Academy that, when you have a location and you now build it up, right? And you build up this location, and in the end of the day, the location is going to be built up so that it's more expensive and has um, more more business, more add values, higher rents, then it's not just about the area that you are supporting. So this is, like I said, this is Poplar Street, and this is the area that they're going to develop primarily. But, and I think the circle goes around somewhere like this to a little bit over Healy Field. But this areas going towards Forest Hills are primarily in fact, there's like a housing projects down here, low income housing, and this area is primarily people of color. Now, this is around this field that would be a little more add value. So, you always say when you're trying to do real estate, it's about location, 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 as we all know. So, when you have a location like this next to add values are the things that sound good on your advertising for your apartment that you build. New complex near Roslindale Square, right? It is next to a field on the T. These are the things that add value. So this area is a prime location for the redevelopment, and making building heights higher here is only going to increase property values here and push this community, which is a low income multicultural community, out. Right. So this is some of the issues that we want you to know. So we want you to try to get involved, especially if you are maybe one of the more fortunate people of your ethnic group. Please get involved because we need you to communicate to the to people who may not really know what's going on. All right. So now, more about the parking dynamics. Now, don't take it from me. Let's look at what some people have said in the community of Roslindale. These quotes are direct, and they were collected by the Roslindale Coalition from business owners. My business owner is mainly 60. My customer base is mainly 60 to 70% Latino and immigrants. Almost all have come from Boston proper, not being able to park in the area or find parking or access. The business affects them. Taxes are affected, immigration are affected. This is another business owner, by the way. Taxes are affected, immigration are affected. Applying for housing and benefits are to their detriment. Not able to comfortably and request my services to help them. I think that is probably from a non first language, first English being their first language, business owner. Also, 90% of my customers come from Boston. The zoning changes will affect us as business owners and affect the customers who do business in Rosendale. The last quote, feel like we are swimming against the current. Anything we request does not get done. Frustrating. The energy sometimes we feel we spend are in vain. All right. So that's just a little bit about what the community is actually saying in regards to the parking. So let's go to metering, right? So, metering, what's metering? We all know what metering is. When you get a ticket, it means you violated the metering. So, you know what it means, right? So, basically, they put rules on the streets to control who can be where and whatever, who can be where, who can park there, how long you can park, right? So some blocks, primarily Black and Latino residents, business owners are subject to 2-hour metering from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. about 6 days a week, right? Now, sometimes this makes us have to feed the meter in order to avoid a ticket. Now, you'll say, well, that's not a big deal. Everybody has to do it. What is so bad? What is so special? Now, I'm not going to go too much into the cultural angle, but there is a cultural angle because I know there's an African braiding store in that vicinity. I've taken my daughter there. They do great work. Check them out. But the issue is that for braiding, I don't know, if you have never braided your hair, you don't realize that 2 hours is very restrictive because what usually happens, people come, they drop they have their daughter there, and if you know anything about braiding black hair, it takes about 4 hours, sometimes 6 hours, even longer to get it done, right? And these are by the experts. So let that metering ends up being an additional burden to the customers. And like I've always said, this is more about the resistance. You just need to create enough resistance in certain areas. And not that these people are, I don't think that they're sitting down in a room rubbing their hands together. How do we make things more difficult for people of color? No, I don't think that is the issue. But I do think that somehow there's an intrinsic bias that when people do things, it just comes out in this lens where they're more stringent. This happens in the school system when students of color get suspended and expelled more. This happens in medical practices where people of color seem to have be less sensitive to pain, right? You know, and this is reflected in our infrastructure. But the problem with our infrastructure is that it's there forever, right? Once they build those roads, these roads of Boston are small because they were built small for trolleys way back in the day. So it's important to understand that this feeding the meter thing is not a small thing. It does create impediments, right? Um, Now, blocks predominantly by white residents benefit from non-metered resident parking and exempt them from similar costs and restrictions, right? Once again, that pattern. Remember, it's a pattern of resistance. And areas within 75 to 80% white residents have minimum parking, offer 4-hour parking spaces, and include zones designated for resident parking. I think we talked about that. So these are just some of the disparities with with the metered parking. And it's important, like I said, we know that. Here's some pictures. The one on the left is the resident parking, and then the one on the right is the 2-hour limit parking, right? All right. So here's some quotes also provided by the Roslindale Coalition. The city would help me and other businesses by simply not adding more parking restrictions. It hurts to hear over and over again how customers choose to stop visiting my business just because they've gotten $50 or $75 parking ticket. Unfortunately, I can't find a good answer for them and I instantly lose them forever. Right. You go down there to get a $20, $30 haircut and then you end up spending $100. Okay. Let that sink in. If prices for parking go up, my customer flow will be affected. The 2 hour parking does not fit with needs. You have a business, you have consideration and respect for businesses. You're looking at 3 to 4 tickets per week. If they're taller buildings with more residents, they will compete with my customers for, right? He doesn't say why, but for the parking spaces, that's what this is for. So if people live in buildings without parking and don't have cars, well, they'll have guests and family and they'll need a place to park. So that I think is very key. More people in the community, it's going to mean more competition for these limited spaces. All right. So is this being done fairly? That's the question. All right. Now, and all these questions, mind you, if you have answers or if you want to comment, please comment please put a comment in the comment section. All right. Next, effective bus transportation. All right. Now, I think I mentioned in the I think I mentioned before how all these streets have buses going down them. Right. There's bus going down Washington Street. There's buses going down here. A bus turns in here. There's a bus stop here. Bus goes down here. There's a bus stop. In fact, one of the cool things about this Google Maps is that there's actually a bus at the bus stop. But this does not limit parking, right? There's still parking in that area. Um, you know, one thing. Okay, let's look at the parking real quick because I normally had done this. There's a few little parking options in Roslindale Square. There is the street parking, as you know. There's municipal plot 8. This is the commuter rail plot, right? And then there's like a bunch of little private parking lots like this one, as you see, where you're not, well, if you're going to the grocery store or something here, then you can use it, this village market, if you're going to that grocery store, but really it's not for public parking, although I don't think that ever stopped the Bostonian. So by the time you look at the parking situation and you see the busing, all these bus lanes, and that there's really no difference. Buses go down Corinth as well. There's actually a bus stop, I think right in here, as you can see. Yep, bus stop there, right? So why is there such restrictions on these areas here, right? These are the bus stops, right? So that is part of why these busing situation. I don't see why there's restrictions in front of African American community, African American and Latino and Asian on popular businesses on Popular Street, but seems as if there's restrictions on other things in those areas. So anyway, the bus lane in Washington Street was extended without clear evidence-based reasons, restricting parking during key access hours. Now, this is on Washington Street. I believe this is in this area right here. This information was provided by, so I think that happened in this area right here, right? Along Washington Street, like right in front of this, um, right in front of that area right there. And there were lack of data, no studies, so we don't understand why. I know that there was some requests for informations that were asked for it. There were not really any conclusive responses. And these community concerns voiced by the Latinx owners were basically not really, they were kind of ignored. And the business owners cite actual losses. So this is not something that's, imaginative. This is real life. The urgent need for inclusive planning that considers all is extremely needed. These are some of the things we need you to advocate for. Okay. So just a little case study. We're going to talk about the bike lanes now, but a little bit of the case study because of this PS Gourmet Coffee is very important to this situation. So we have basically a place that offers $1 coffee for kind of like the lower end of the spectrum of coffees, right? If you like your Dunkin' Donuts, nothing wrong with that. But I ask you to support these mom and pop shops, and they put a bike lane here. Now they barricaded it. Remember, this business is now surrounded by the stop on this side and the and a bike lane on this side. So there's literally no place for you to park unless you go somewhere far and walk. No convenience. Remember, this is about resistance. And if the resistance is too much and it causes, like I said, the 10, 15%, maybe 20% lost in revenue, that puts a business out of business. That's what the city's supposed to step in to try and alleviate. You can see some here. They have some signs on their door. Please be courteous to neighbors when parking illegally. Please don't park on one side of the street. So you can see here a little closely to have the barricades up. This could be a great parking lane. Apparently, I don't know if it's supposed to be a bike lane, but me personally, I'm not too much for the bikes. This is a bike lane right in here, and I understand that this is not about saying bikes are bad or bikes are not good. Like I said, you can make an argument for anything. But Boston streets are super narrow. We're not like any other place. So yes, we would love bikes to have dedicated bike lanes in the middle of our streets. But when you think of the parking and other issues, so basically bike lanes, and let's be real, these bike lanes are not utilized to the point of where this would be utilized if it was used for parking for this space. So it's not a well utilized. It's just not. I don't think it's a major priority. Sounds good, right? We all want eco-friendly this and eco-friendly that. Then let us go back to electrified trolleys. That's a real dent. But don't this might this is not causing this is not going to change any climate change issue by having bike lanes. It's cold in Boston most of the year. People of color do not ride bikes. If you see the data on bikes and how much people of color use bikes, it's not to me, it's not an effective use of space. Okay, I'll say it again. It is not an effective use of space. All right, especially when these businesses are going to be out of business. All right. On to the next. More about the bike lanes. Like I said, there's no nearby parking options. People park on the road, and I took my drone out there to take some of these pictures. As you can see here, this is the bike lane. This is that intersection, right? There was somebody that parked there right at the between. I mean, I must have been flying maybe 30 minutes. Within 10 minutes, I was in this area maximum. And this was already happening. And I know there was another one. I have another picture, some other place where there's a guy. So people are now just parking in the middle of the street and they're still going in because it is not, it's just not a tenable situation. So you're not solving the problem. And then also, this street is not busy. This is the major thoroughfare. This is Washington Street. This is a major thoroughfare. This is Poplar. This is Corinth. These are all major. This is a side street. I take it all the way when I want to get around the traffic going down Cummings, right? So let's keep it real, y'all. So I want to kind of end on this quick comparison between the Square Root, which is a business in this area here that has $3 coffee, a little more high end, and then you have the gourmet coffee we talked about that has the $1 end, right? Now, as I said, there's more conveniences and parking. Not only this street has actually been closed down completely, it's now like completely space for. I think if we go back to the Google Maps, if you go back to the Google Maps, you will see this is the area we're talking about. That's the Square Root right there, right? This is actually outside parking for the business, for outside seating for the businesses. So the street has actually been completely closed down. All right, completely. And I think it used to be a turn area for trolleys. So, like, trolley will come, turn, and go back. But anyway, that's beside the point. But this is the parking. This is the 15-minute parking. So, if you want to go in there and buy something, they think it takes 15 minutes. And I think that's fair. I'm just saying, why this doesn't exist when you go down to Poplar Street, where, and this is not parking, by the way. I think this is the 5 minute parking. Oops, my bad. This is the 5 minute parking, right? But this is not parking. This is people turning onto, as you can see, this car here. So you're really kind of like, it's not designated. It's a little more, problematic in that area. But I don't think it's any more problematic, engineerily speaking, than all of this. This is way more complicated than that. So, why do these disparities exist? They need to explain why. But anyway, these are some of the differences. And they also plan to actually have, like, they're going to increase the park. Actually, let me go back to that. They're going to increase the park around this Alexander Grade and try to make this even more hospitable and comfortable for this area. While I know that Adams Park, they're trying to Adams, close this area around Poplar Street. They're going to close this area. I'm having navigation issues. They're going to close this area around Poplar Street, right, on weekends so that they can have events here. Now, you may think that that's great, but let's go into the leads. When you bring in people, a lot of people, anytime there's like the Celtics playing, right? Don't go to North Station, right? Same difference. If you have a lot of people here, people are not going to come because I won't find parking. It's going to be congested. It's going to be this. Then the people that are here are coming for particular these things. They may not, they most likely, these are like, like I said, they probably will not be doing so much of the shopping, although there will be, of course, some increased shopping there. But the regular customer base will not be able to come on their convenient time. So are we going to have them rely on what's going on there? All right. But anyway, this is sort of like I said, just a little bit of the disparities with the low income coffee, and they, like I said, they're going to do the Alexander the Great Park, right? So, in summary, right, I think that it's important for all of us to get involved. You've seen this podcast, you've learned a little bit more. Put any comments in the section, write questions, email me, Afro American Academy. I'm going to give you my information in a little bit, but it's important that you guys get involved because without you knowing and also being able to communicate this information, share it to different people or just explain in your language, whatever it may be. Other people need to know about all these different things and all these little minute little things that seem minute. You walk by them every day, but who's going to be looking around at all the parking? How long the businesses are metered for? Are the business meterings in at the right time? Are they, because let's say I have business coming in from not, from 10 o'clock, from 8 to 10, right? Coffee business, right? And then you can't park specifically within those time periods, right? That kills my business because my busiest time of the day, they can't park. So, like I said, there are a lot of different things that are going on. If you want to help out, please sign this development without displacement petition. This one is not on Roslindale Square, it's on everybody, but for everybody, but it is provided by the Roslindale Coalition. So if you want to add your voice, that's the QR code, please do. And I want to thank everyone for another episode of the Redline Narratives Podcast. And the Afro American Culture Initiative, we want to keep providing bridges like this. That's our motto. That's our mission statement. Engineering restorative bridges in underserved multicultural communities. That's what we do. And this podcast is a bridge that we are doing, something that you can share with your community and get them more informed to make informed decisions and hopefully create a more equitable Boston moving forward. So we would appreciate support. There's QR code. Please, you can go ahead and make a donation, support this podcast. We would appreciate it. Follow us on social media. Remember, like, subscribe to Afro American TV. Like us, follow us on social media. We have a documentary coming out in February on the history of not of infrastructure and how it affected a lot of the underserved multicultural communities back in the day. See, we're out here serving communities that don't even exist anymore. They were underserved, but we're still their voices matter because they were Bostonians, taxpaying Bostonians. So we're going to do that. Also, for February, we have Boston Red Line Black History Month event series, right? It's the focus is development without displacement. We're going to be at the Mass State House on January 25th to talk about, to bring all these different communities together, talk about the displacement on People Before Highways Day. We have a lot lined up for Black History Month, so stay tuned. And thank you once again for your patronage at the Redline Narratives Podcast. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see